We'll call to order the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board of Thursday, March 7th, 2024. Present at the front table to my far left is Jessica Vitale, a voting member.
Evening.
Next to Jessica is Ed Bagargi, a voting member. My immediate left, Ernie Angelos, our solicitor.
Good evening.
Bill Rhodes, a voting member. Jesse Poyton, voting member. And Gary Smith, our zoning officer. Before we begin, Bill, would you lead us in the pledge? Sure.
Please rise if you can. After me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bill. We have 3 new cases on the agenda this evening, one of which has requested a continuance to our next hearing. That's case Z2405, Marion Golf Club. So that case is continued to our March 21st hearing.
And just for the record, I did receive a continuance request from Marion's counsel extending the MPC time periods to that date.
And I need to publicly announce that the board had a meeting with our solicitor in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss pending appeal matters. The first case we're going to do this evening is Z2404. Joseph and Bonnie McGibney, owners of 425 Rittenhouse Circle, Havertown, PA, DC folio number 2201-0140800, who seek a variance from the provisions of section 182-207C5A to encroach into the required 30-foot front yard setback by 11 feet to construct a 10-foot by 21-foot covered front porch. The property is zoned R5 and located in the 7th Ward. Joe and Bonnie, where are you guys at? Is Joe here? Oh, come on up. How you doing, Joe?
Good evening.
So, Joe, attached to your application, you have photographs and some other things. If you want to make them part of the record, we should identify them and mark them before we start. Do you know which of the attachments to your application you want to mark as exhibits?
Yes, do you want to just mark them as we go?
Well, let's mark them in advance. You probably want to do your plot plan and your photos, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm just going to help you along. Why don't we?
Want to use mine?
I got it. So please correct me, Joe, if I misstate anything. So we'll make A1 your plot plan.
Correct.
Is that okay? A2 will be the photo with the caption, current front porch 20 feet by 18 feet.
Correct.
A3 will be the photo with the captions 416, 432, 444, etc. Is that okay? That's A3. A4 will be the photos with the caption 421, 417, 413, Rittenhouse.
Correct.
And that's it. Is there anything else that you want to submit as part of the case?
Just make sure there's nothing else on there.
Yeah. The bulk and area?
There should be an
bulk
impervious
Yeah.
study in there as well.
So we'll make that A5. Is that all right with you?
Yes.
So we have A1 through A5, and I'm sure you want to admit them to the record, so those exhibits are admitted unless there's some objection. Please tell us a little bit about what you would like to do and why.
So currently, as you can see,
Oh, sorry. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes.
And I have to do it one at a time, so I took hers first. Please state your full name and address for the record.
Bonnie Lee McGibney, 429 Rittenhouse Circle, Havertown, Pennsylvania, 19083.
And now you, Joe. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And your full name and address for the record, please.
Joseph McGibney, 429 Rittenhouse Circle, Havertown, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Now, please tell us a little bit about what you would like to do.
As you can see in Exhibit A2, we currently have an 20 by 18 front porch. We want to remove that and replace it with a 20 by 21 foot front porch and cover that. Currently, there is no covering structure. I would like to put a covering structure to match the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Also to,
Give you some protection from the elements.
correct, reduce electricity use and things of that nature.
Questions? Jessica?
So a lot of the pictures on A2, A3 and A4, you can see that the overhanging roof has a side to it. And in most of these, it appears to be clad with some kind of horizontal siding. Would that be your intention for your porch as well?
Correct.
And what will the roof be made of?
Shingle.
Shingle. And does that match what's on your house right
Yes.
now? And do you plan on installing any gutters on the roof?
There will be front gutters, yes.
And where will that empty?
Into the, what side would that be? It would be the side, you're looking at the front of the house to the left, away from the front door
Okay.
in the building.
And then can you talk a little bit about why you want to expand the porch?
The reason that we would need to expand is, if you see on the picture, the 18-foot where it comes out, that's directly in front of the front door. So in order to put a foot or a post there, you need to move over the 3 feet so you're able to secure the roof.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Ed?
Yes. Do you know when this porch that's currently there, patio, I should say, was constructed?
I believe it's original with the home, sir.
Original with the house, good. Would you agree to a condition that if we were to approve this variance, that you would not further enclose the structure at any time?
The only enclosure that would be necessary would be a railing because it is 24 inches in height.
Okay.
So it would need a railing. That would be the only enclosure.
Thank you. Would you agree that you would not put any utilities other than electric?
Correct.
I have no other question.
Bill?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I understood. The proposal is to widen this, but not to go closer to the road in front of the house. Is that right?
Correct. It's currently 10 feet in depth. We're keeping that. It would be the width, going from
Okay.
18 to 21.
And the purpose of the width, I just want to make sure I understood it. Right now, you have a narrower or shallower concrete pad right in front of your door, but the end effect of this would be to bring that existing pad out to in line with the rest of the wider portion of that front patio?
Correct.
Okay, and would that then extend to the right of the doorway?
Yes.
Okay, but no more than than the shallower concrete already extends past the door?
It would be 3 feet to the right.
Okay, so it would be 3 feet beyond that, the slab in front of your door?
I just want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly.
Yeah, and the reason I ask this is because it's hard to tell from A1 where that
So-
cutback is.
Okay. So A1, if you see the solid pad, the 10 by 18,
Yep,
and then where the dotted line is the proposed 3 feet wider.
Yep.
10 feet. So that would be the addition.
okay, so the existing slab in front of your doorway is within the 10 by 18 depiction, or is
Correct.
that in addition to that?
It's within that.
It's within that, okay. And then, so the reason, so looking at A2, the railing to the right of the door, the covered patio would probably now extend over that hose reel?
It would be approximately to the end of that hose reel there.
Okay.
Yes.
And why was the need to go that far beyond the door?
For the footer structure of the roof.
Okay, thanks.
Jesse?
And as part of the extension, are you also adding steps to get up to match the height of where you have it now?
Yes, the stairs, I know it's hard to tell in this picture, but the stairs come out, or the current sidewalk comes out and to the right. The stairs will then be out and to the right as well.
All my other questions have already been asked, so no other questions.
Okay, I have no other questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Joe?
No, sir.
Bonnie? All these people are here to testify, don't they? So it might take a while. Okay, no other questions? Jess, Ed, Jesse, Bill? All right. Jessica, are you prepared to vote?
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody's here for this. I'll ask, is there anyone present that received certified mail that wishes to testify? Anyone present that received regular mail? Any other residents of Haverford Township? Jessica, are you prepared to vote? Ed?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Jesse, would you please take this decision?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would vote to approve the requested relief with the following reasonable conditions. That there will be no enclosure of the porch except a railing. The only utility will be electric. Water will be managed so as not to adversely impact neighbors. The project will be completed within 1 year and in accordance with the notes of testimony.
Bill?
I agree.
Ed?
I concur.
Jessica?
Agree?
And so do I. That application is approved 5-0.
Thank you.
And, wait, so. All right, all right.
Usual.
All right, so before we begin, I want to ask everyone that any exchanges be respectful and quiet toward one another. The clapping, shouting, yelling, it's just disruptive to the hearing and it's going to drag things out, because if it happens too often, I'm going to ask whoever the catalyst is to leave, or we'll just take breaks every time it happens and the case won't get done until December. So let's just be respectful of one another and we can get through this. I know there are emotional viewpoints on both sides, I'm sure, but everyone deserves to be heard, and we're going to get through this case. So, without further ado, our next case is Z2402, Savage Sisters Recovery, Inc., applicant, lessee of 1710B Road, Havertown, PA, DC folio number 2202-0106300, who seeks a variance from the provisions of section 182206B1 to allow more than 3 unrelated persons occupying a dwelling unit, living together and maintaining a common household per the definition of a family. In addition, the applicant is requesting relief from section 104.10.a and 104-11 with regard to requiring an inspection for each change in tenant and for providing a list of individual tenants. The property is zoned R4 and located in the 2nd Ward. So I presume we have some attorneys that want to enter their appearance. Is the attorney for the applicant here? Hello?
My name is Mac Murphy. I'm here with Bob DeLuca on behalf of Savage Sisters.
Yeah.
Is that microphone on, by the way?
Yes, apologies. My name is Mac Murphy. I'm here with Robert DeLuca on behalf of Savage Sisters Recovery. I have the exhibits if you would all like a copy.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Robert DeLuca. My state ID number is 49947. Here on behalf of Savage Sisters.
Thank you.
As I just have a preliminary matter to discuss about representation.
Okay, let's get everyone's appearance entered on the record, Jennifer, and then we'll
Great.
move to that. So, go ahead, John.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jennifer Bazidlo, B-A-Z-Y-D-L-O. I'm here on behalf of a near neighbor, Will Hitchcock, who will be asking for party status. He is across the street, so the status would be based on proximity.
Thank you, Jennifer.
2210B.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And good evening. My name is John Walco. I'm the solicitor for Haverford Township. I'm here tonight appearing on behalf of the township. But I'd just like to make clear that the township is appearing tonight in a merely administrative role in order to comply with the Fair Housing Act and with the information that's known to it currently, and not in support of, and certainly not against, the application. So a neutral position. Rather, this application was filed with this board pursuant to Township Code Chapter 81, which is the Fair Housing chapter of our code, which provides that it's the township's policy pursuant to the requirements of the Fair Housing Act to provide people with disabilities with reasonable accommodations and the rules, policies, practices, and procedures that may be necessary to ensure equal housing. That is a requirement that is applicable to all municipalities under the Fair Housing Act. Section 81.3 of that chapter states that if there is a reasonable accommodation request that requires discretionary approval, like a variance, then the applicant must also file that request for a reasonable accommodation from whoever provides that discretionary approval. So here it's my understanding that the applicant is requesting a reasonable accommodation in part from the zoning code, and hence the reason that it's before you here tonight. And now you have one of the best zoning attorneys in Delaware County as your solicitor, so I'm sure he's going to inform you in your quasi-judicial deliberations the differences between a reasonable accommodation variance request under the Fair Housing Act and your typical variance standards that you usually see related to hardships in the land. But I imagine that he's essentially going to advise you that since the applicant is seeking a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act, that you must evaluate whether the applicant, one, is subject to the act, and if so, what is necessary to afford such disabled persons an equal opportunity to use and enjoy the dwelling at issue. At which point the burden would shift to any opponents to show that the requested accommodations are not reasonable. So tonight, I would hope that the applicant's going to be providing testimony as to the reason they are requesting the accommodation and why it's necessary for the individuals to reside at this property to have that accommodation, to use and enjoy that dwelling. 2, the potential impact of that accommodation on the surrounding land uses and the surrounding neighbors. And 3, whether the requested accommodation will require a fundamental alteration in the nature of the zoning code. So all that being said, again, I wanted to stress that you should not interpret the township's appearance here tonight for any reason but to, 1, facilitate the provisions of the Township Chapter 81 Fair Housing Act chapter. 2, to help ensure that there's a sufficient record to support any decision that you may make related to this request for reasonable accommodation. And 3, to assist in establishing any potential conditions of relief, if any, for an application in order to make sure that the accommodation is a reasonable accommodation, if so granted. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Waldo, just real quick, because I just want to confirm and see if you were in agreement. The applicant requested, in addition to the reasonable accommodation, relief from section 104-10.A and 104-11 with regard to requiring inspections for each change in tenant, as not something that is within the purview of the zoning hearing board and typically falls under the code enforcement of the township. Would you agree?
That is correct. The Fair Housing Act chapter requires any code reasonable accommodations to be requested. So my understanding, the applicant requested those as well, but those are not zoning matters. Those are actually matters that, if the matter does proceed, would come back before, I think, the township to consider reasonable accommodations for those non-zoning matters, which again is a reason that the township is remaining neutral in this, as they may be subject to future supervision or future rulings on different matters related to the property.
And I would concur with that. So to narrow the scope of what is before this board this evening, it would be relevant to just the definition of family within the zoning code as it relates to more than 3 unrelated individuals.
Correct. The other matters, the other 104 relief is something that would be handled outside of this board by the township and is being addressed concurrently.
Thank you.
Jonathan, are you going to cross-examine witnesses? Shall I call on you? Or will
I would like the opportunity. Again, I would like to just make sure there's a record if there's any questions. We don't intend to call our own witnesses. Again, we're merely here on a sort of a fact-finding mission about what's being requested, what's being presented, and their positions as to why what they're seeking is a reasonable accommodation.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, before we proceed, I do have
Yes,
two
please
preliminary
come
matters
forward,
that need to
Jennifer.
be addressed. The first is, my understanding is that this is being handled, I forget what your name is. What's your name? Mac, who is a certified legal intern and not an attorney under PA law. She is not able to represent a corporation and is not able to represent an organization in her capacity as a certified legal intern. Obviously, we have an attorney here who can do all the questioning and work, but I would object to any questioning of witnesses by the certified legal intern or presentation of any material by her.
I could adjust that as well.
Sure.
Yeah, so under PA bar 321 and 322, I do have the capacity to represent individuals who are indigent, as well as, in this case, it's pro bono. The residents are indigent, and I am supervised by an attorney. So under those laws, I am able to do that.
The applicant is Savage Sisters. Savage Sisters is a well-funded organization and is not an individual, is a corporation.
It's a nonprofit corporation.
But it is still not an individual and does not meet the definition under Rule 322.
All right, so I'll note the objection for the record. We have a lot of people here this evening that I'm sure would want to see this at least can move forward and I'm sure we'll get to a vote tonight, but at least moving this forward. So we'll note the objection for the record. Mr. DeLuca is here as the supervising attorney, so
Right.
we'll allow the matter to proceed.
And then
Thank you.
the second objection is that I don't believe Savage Sisters has standing to even be bringing this application. The lease submitted with the application is not signed by the registered owner of the property, Carmine DeFalsis. That's in the deed. I have a copy of that deed. So I can go to, and you guys?
Thanks, Jennifer.
You need me to speak up? Sorry, I wasn't. Oh, you need a copy. Yes, I have a copy for you as well. Sorry.
Need to be more.
So I would like to mark that as P1. This is the last recorded deed for this property. Mr. DeFalsis has been deceased since 2010. I spoke ahead of time with the representatives. They do not have a copy of the will here. They do not have any evidence that it has been probated or that the ownership has passed to Alma. So without that ability to prove that she is the owner of the property, there's no standing to bring this application because it's not a valid lease.
May I respond?
Certainly.
It automatically transfers her to her by law as joint tenants. And I also have the realtor here tonight to testify regarding this matter.
On that matter, it was owned solely by Carmine and not as joint tenants or any sort of capacity together. In fact, in 1998, as you can see, this property was specifically transferred from joint ownership to single ownership. And so if there is a will, that will dictates who that property is going to go to. And so we need to see who owns this property before we can even proceed with this matter, because otherwise, if they don't have a valid lease, they don't have standing.
So,
I'm assuming as part of your presentation, you were going to establish standing and raise any issues or questions in that.
I have Stephen Eckel here, the realtor, who will address that.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's note the objection there. Let's at least let you proceed in that fashion, and then we can kind of make a preliminary determination after that, or can certainly preserve that objection for appellate issues as well. So, okay, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you.
Oh,
I believe,
and by the way, any objection to having this marked in?
No.
P1's in.
okay, but
I
why don't
believe
you
that
go
there
ahead
have
and
been-
establish standing, Bob?
Thank you. I believe that there's been 8 exhibits marked 1 through 8, A1 through 8, and then I'm going to request that the actual application be marked as A9. And do you want me to start with the standing issue?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Abbott. You don't mind, I'm going to stick my stuff on the shelf under here, where do you want me?
Didn't realize there was one.
Yeah, right here.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Your full name and the capacity in which you appear this evening?
Stephen M. Eckel. I am the real estate broker representing the owner of the property. Steven, M as in Mark, Eckell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Eckel, who do you work for?
I work for Coldwell Banker Realty and Media.
And how long have you been employed as a realtor?
I've been practicing real estate for 33 years.
I'm going to show you which was pre-marked as A1, Exhibit 1. Can you tell us what that is?
Let me get my spectacles out. That's a residential lease for 17 Temby Road.
And who drafted that lease?
I drafted the lease.
And on whose behalf did you draft the lease?
Alma DeFalsis.
And who's the current owner of the property?
Alma DeFalsis.
And in terms of that lease, does that lease authorize Savage Sisters Recovery, Inc. to come before the zoning board and request the variance?
Yes.
And is that listed, I believe, on the last page of the lease? Under additional
Yes.
terms?
Yes.
And who put that language in the lease so that it would be subject to zoning approval?
I wrote it with a little help
Okay.
from my retired lawyer father.
And does that indicate that tenant at their sole expense is responsible for obtaining any approval for the uses of the property from Haverford Township?
Yes.
And that approval must be obtained prior to housing more than 3 unrelated individuals at one time?
Correct. Yes.
And did you do this on behalf of Alma?
Yes.
And she is the owner of the property?
Yes.
Do you know whether the deed to the property has been changed since the death of her husband?
I do not know that.
And where was the estate raised regarding this matter?
Mr. and Mrs. DeFalsis lived in Allentown, so he may have passed in Allentown. I've never met the man. I've only met Alma.
Thank you. And prior to leasing the property, you had the proper owner of the property in order to lease it. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have nothing further of this witness.
I have
Jennifer?
some questions. So before, you listed the property on the local listing service, correct?
Yes.
All right. And prior to doing that, did you receive any proof of ownership to show that Alma was the owner of the property?
No.
All right. Do you have any documentation since that you received that would indicate she is the owner of the property?
I don't have any documentation. I know she's the owner.
Okay. It was represented to you by the family, or who told you she was the owner?
Her son, who I deal with, and she's also the owner of the adjacent property next door.
That is correct. But you have no other documents other than the deed we presented here as P1 that shows a different ownership?
I just have what I was told, and I have no reason to doubt them.
All right. And you've not seen a copy of the will? You've not seen any probate information?
No.
All right. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any cross, Bob? Or
No.
redirect, rather?
I don't know if the panel has any questions or.
No questions for the township.
All right.
And is it DeFallis? How did I say it?
DeFalsis.
DeFallis. And she's alive, correct?
Absolutely.
Mr. DeLuca and, sorry, what's your last name again? I apologize.
This is Lou.
All right, sorry about that.
That's why I just
Obviously-
with first names.
Yeah, obviously, if there's a will, that would, and it was probated, that would dictate who the beneficiaries are of the estate. Would you agree that to the extent that the owner died intestate, that it would follow through the intestacy statute, which would then typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, pass to a spouse first before it then passes down to the children and so on and so forth? Is that accurate?
Correct. I can bring up witnesses that we did check to see if a will had been probated or a estate opened in Allentown and Delaware County, and they had not. as far as we are aware, under both names in the deed, Carmine and Carmen, just because I think there's a typo in the deed as well. And we have no record of a will being probated or intestate estate.
Did you check to see if there was an estate opened in Allentown or anywhere else?
This issue just came up to me tonight, so no, I did not.
Okay. You want to take a break?
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. I want the board to come back to go over this. We're going to resume the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board. This standing matter is critical, and I don't believe that adequate standing has been established. So we're going to proceed because all these residents opposed, in favor, whatever, are here. And there's no way we're going to get through this entire case this evening. So at the conclusion of tonight's hearing, we're going to continue it to a future hearing date. And at the beginning of that hearing, we need to resolve the standing issue. If it's not resolved, I mean, it may turn out to have been an error to proceed tonight without having established adequate standing. But for the residents' sake, we're going to continue tonight and we're going to take testimony. But at the beginning of the next hearing, we have to resolve it.
I'll bring in the order.
Okay.
And the objection is noted for the record.
Thank you.
Okay. Please proceed with your case in chief.
Thank you. Go.
So we'd like to continue on with Exhibit 2, A2. This is the Certificate of Licensure. This is just proof from the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs that Savage Sisters has been officially legally licensed to run a recovery house and to provide drug and alcohol activities within that recovery house. Moving on to Exhibit 3, A3. We received a lot of complaints ahead of time regarding the parking situation, and a lot of community members have expressed concerns surrounding the parking. So we have provided an official written statement to address that matter. So within the on-site, there is private parking on the in the driveway. We understand that it is narrow, however, we have tested it, and the vehicles do fit, so it fits up to 3 vehicles. If at any time there are any more than 3 vehicles, Savage Sisters will personally pay for a private parking permit in a lot. We are not going to permit the residents to park on the street. Yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but are you going to present, so what you're saying now comes across as testimony. Are you going to present witnesses to establish this? Or are you going to just rely on your presentation to the board to establish this?
We do have witnesses here this evening. We have the founder, Sarah Laurel, and we also have the operations director, Adam Al-Assad, who can both testify to this. It is signed by Adam, so he can testify if you'd like that.
Do you have the measurements of the driveway? If you don't, bring them with you next time.
We can bring them with us next time.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
along the same lines, also, the off-street parking, the 2 off-street parking spaces, they can't be end-to-end. They have to be, so that you can't have to move one vehicle in order to get the other vehicle out. So that's also part of the off-street parking requirement. So if you would provide information as to the arrangement and, all the dimensions of the driveway, and any other additional parking location on the property, that would provide the 2 9 by 18 spaces that are required.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can come prepared with that next time.
Thank you.
If they're going to present exhibits, can I question on the exhibits as they go through, or would you like me to question on them, all of them at the end?
I don't want to do it one by one. You have a copy of the exhibits there,
I
right,
do
Jen?
not have a copy of the exhibits.
Do you have a copy of the exhibits for Jennifer? And for the township attorney as well, Mr. Walco? Did you get a copy?
I have plenty of copies.
Yes, I was provided with copies today.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess the first thing on that is, certainly I think you could object to exhibits. I mean, as they're being presented, I don't know who specifically you could cross-examine, since there's technically no witnesses being presented at this particular point. I think what they're trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just to kind of get through the exhibits right now to identify what they are for the record, and then, presumingly that you would present testimony in connection with it, at which point.
Sure, so
yeah.
I want to interjection about the parking exhibit. There is inconsistent information provided in their application and the addendum. In their application, they state that only about 10% of the residents have cars, and in the addendum, they put that 23%, which is a quite significant increase in that percentage. And I am concerned about the inconsistent and unreliable information being presented and the validity of the document being presented.
So why don't we do this? Why don't you run through the exhibits, identify what they are for the record, and then proceed with testimony to talk about whatever presentation you want to make in connection with parking or any other exhibits, at which point then you'll have the ability to cross-examine.
Great.
And then if there's any discrepancies in what the exhibit says, obviously, the evidentiary rulings here before this court or before this board are relaxed, and the full rules of evidence don't apply. Therefore, we could admit hearsay, but we would just give it due weight. If there is inconsistencies, obviously, that would be something that the board would review. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. Exhibit 4 is, it is just the form that we provide to residents after the intake process. And we can specifically have a witness discuss the intake process in more clarity to provide cross-examination. But this emphasizes the requirements that are set on to any resident that would like to enter the program and an agreement that they must sign prior. And Exhibit 6 is the tax. Exhibit 5 is the tax records for 1710B Road, which highlight that Carmen, the deceased, was the owner, and Exhibit 6 is 2110B Road directly across the street that highlight that Alma is the owner. She is now presently the owner of both, but we were just adding that. Obviously,
The categorization of her being the owner of 1710B.
Sustained. That's a matter that we're going to
Yeah.
determine at the
that's what I was going to say.
next hearing.
Obviously, that's something we'll have to address at the next.
Also, just, it's a mischaracterization of where the properties are located. They're not across the street from each other.
Okay, that's noted. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay.
7.
Exhibit 7 is an email of support of Savage Sisters opening this home from a couple with experience in the industry who have lost a loved one themselves. And Exhibit 8, we wanted to include...
Object to the entering of that as well, as they are not residents of Haverford Township, nor are they associated with this organization.
No. Not doing that.
I just don't think that that is at all relevant and completely relevant to the purposes here.
Okay, so they're identifying the exhibits now. They haven't moved them. You can object when they move them after we've received testimony. Presumably, they're going to call other witnesses, but that's noted. Go ahead, Matt. A8.
Yes, A8 is, this is an email from an individual in the community who was opposed to the opening, and we thought that that was important to address the issues, as we do believe it pertains to the family issue that we're here to discuss today. And then Exhibit 9 is the application itself.
Go ahead.
You can call your first witness.
Yes, we are going to call Adam Al-Assad. He's the the Director of Operations for Savage Sisters Recovery.
Hello, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the board this evening, please?
Adam Al-Assad, and Director of Operations at Savage Sisters Recovery.
And I'm going to ask you to spell your name for Arlene, please.
ADAM space AL-ASAD.
And you're the Director of Operations?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you.
Back or Bob?
Adam, how long have you been the Director of Operations?
Since we were founded officially in 2020, but I've been working for Savage Sisters since 2020. For the first 2.5 years, I was fully volunteer.
What are your duties as the Director of Operations?
I fulfill all back-end responsibilities. I write grants, I do fundraising, I do the bookkeeping, I manage other employees, and I handle the social media.
In terms of this property, have you been out to this property?
Yes.
Did you look at the parking on the property?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 3. It says 1710B Road Parking Addendum. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And is that your signature at the end?
Yes, it is.
Why don't you explain for the board what you did and what you believe is going to be the parking situation there?
Absolutely. So we've heard complaints from neighbors that there was an issue with the parking, and so as we had done in a previous situation at another home that we had a zoning hearing for, we resolved that issue by writing up an addendum stating how many cars we would allow for the residents to have. I'll slow down, no problem.
And how many vehicles did you allow for in your addendum?
3.
And how do you get to the number 3? Tell everyone how you get to 3 and why you believe there's only going to be 3 cars at that establishment.
Absolutely. So the vast majority of the folks that are coming into our program are coming in fresh into recovery, and they do not own a car. When this issue previously came up, we went ahead and did a count of all of our current residents at the time. At that time, it was 52 residents, and only 25% of them had cars, just under that, actually. In this situation, in this home, there would likely be even less than that. And so either way, we made it 3 cars because that would result in 33% of the 9 residents that we would have, which would allow for more than what we expected. And so basically it was to just be safe.
If this variance is granted, do you have a problem with them indicating no more than 3 cars at that establishment?
No problem at all, is because it's incredibly unlikely that that will ever happen. We'll ensure that it doesn't.
Well, is there a supervisor on site as well?
At the house, there is an on-site house manager that lives on the property, yes.
So that's going to be 1 car, right?
The on-site house manager does not necessarily have a car, but likely.
Okay.
We do have property managers that will be visiting the property regularly as well. They do not live there, and they will have cars.
And let's talk about that. This is a how many bedroom house to your understanding?
5.
And what's the maximum number of people that would be at that house?
9.
And how is that calculated?
2 per room, plus the house manager gets his own room.
So you would have 4 rooms with 2 people and 1 room with 1 person. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Did you go to the premises to determine how the cars would fit there?
At the beginning of at the time that we rented the property, I went to the property and looked at the driveway. However, after I was informed of the issue with the neighbor, I did not go specifically to look at the driveway when creating that addendum.
Okay.
However, I did already know what the driveway looked like, as I had been to the property on several occasions.
And were you also involved in the leasing of that premises?
Yes.
And do you also work with Sarah regarding these matters?
Yes, I do. I work with Sarah as well as all of our other 11 employees.
Okay. Let's talk about what's been marked as Exhibit 4. Is this paperwork that is done with any resident?
All residents incoming go through all of that paperwork, yes.
And are there requirements in this paperwork that they have to do?
There are many strict requirements. Our program is incredibly structured.
Now, is this a rehab? What is it?
Nothing close to a rehab, nothing close to a drop-in center. It is a house where up to 9 people will live fresh into recovery after having completed a stay in a rehab.
And are they allowed to be actively using while they live in this house?
Absolutely not. We do randomly drug test our residents as well as alcohol breathalyze them randomly once a week.
And are there requirements as to age?
Yes, you have to be 18 or older.
Now, there's been many different things going about the internet regarding this property, and I want to, for the residents, try to dispel some of these things.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there checks done regarding the residents that move into your home?
Yes.
There's,
What kind of checks are you talking about, Bob? And I haven't heard anything on the internet. I don't read that stuff, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I will, and I'll get to it. Are there child molesters living in your home?
No, they're not.
What type of background checks are done regarding these residents?
Sex offender lists, that is it. We do not do criminal background checks on our residents, as obviously when you are in recovery, unfortunately, you will likely have had to deal with some criminal background issues. Our managers, our employees, of course, on the other hand, do go through all of those checks.
You have a beginning of residency and you have admission criteria that has been submitted. Do they have to go through an intake process?
They go through 2 intake processes, yes.
Do they have to be 18 years of age?
Yes.
Do they have to have a desire to remain sober?
Yes.
Do they have to pass a urine test?
Yes, randomly once a week.
Do they have to sign a code of conduct and consent to residency, which includes resident rights and orientation handbook?
Yes.
Are the residents asked to have goals regarding living there?
They're not only asked to have goals, they are required to fulfill regular milestones.
And how long is the average residency for someone living there?
6 months. However, the goal is to have them there for anywhere from 6 months to 2 years.
And are there requirements to complete residency at the house?
There are many requirements to complete residency, yes.
And can you go through some of them with us?
Yes. First, you have to get an NA home group. Then you have to get a sponsor at that home group. You have to get a commitment at that home group. You also have to do job search, and you have to get gainful employment. You have to attend at least one form of therapy, all of which we provide at no cost to the residents. Those forms of therapy consist of cognitive behavioral therapy, which we pay for from Phoenix Trauma Experiential Centers, kickboxing, yoga, and Reiki, which we pay for from local providers, many of whom operate in Haverford Town.
And then do they have to maintain a period of sobriety?
Yes, if they relapse, then we help them get back into rehab if they are willing to go back to rehab. But any lapse in sobriety means that they are no longer allowed to stay at the property.
And do you have a criteria for termination of residency if somebody doesn't comply?
Yes, we have one that complies with DDEP's requirements, which are that we give them every opportunity to get into rehab. However, if somebody relapses, they are out that day. They are not given a night. We provide transportation to where they need to go. Hopefully that would be rehab in most situations, and then we do hold the bed for that individual in hopes that they will come back to the program after they've completed another 28 to 30-day stay in rehab, sometimes even 60 days, but unfortunately, public insurance only pays for 30.
This lady really can't talk.
Sorry about that.
She can't type that fast.
Absolutely.
I talk fast, but you have me beat here.
Yeah, I'm a little anxious, to be honest, so what are you going to do?
Okay. Now let's talk about, as part of Exhibit 3, we've included residency requirements. Are there requirements for residency?
Yes, there is a plethora of requirements for residency, yes.
Okay. Is there curfew?
There is an 11 o'clock curfew at all homes.
And is there house meetings every week?
Every Sunday, they have an in-person house meeting, yes.
Do they have to go on job search or get a job?
Yes, so for the first 2 weeks that they are in the house, they're actually not allowed to leave the house for anything except for job search and therapy, and AA and NA meetings. And then after that, if they are not able to get employment within that time period, they actually stay in that until they do get employment. And we provide workforce development services as well as resume support from a ton of volunteers, including our board and some of our staff.
Do they have to attend meetings?
At least one AA or NA meeting every single day, yes.
How about if packages and things are delivered to the house? How's that handled?
Packages actually get delivered for our staff. They get delivered to our facility, and then we transport them to the house. However, residents, we've never really had an issue with residents getting packages delivered. But if they do, all mail that comes into the house is not opened, but it is checked by the house manager, who then gives it to the residents.
Are they allowed to have guests at the house?
No, absolutely not. No guests.
If a guest does come, do they have to have prior approval?
We really don't allow for guests. If it's a family visit, then yes, they do have to get prior approval, but family visits aren't typically guests.
And the resident requirements set forth here, are they the requirements that are signed by both the resident and the house manager?
Exactly.
Are they enforced?
Strictly.
And is there, who makes sure that this stuff is being done?
So there's a layer of command. You've got your on-site house manager, then you've got your property manager. You have one male property manager. You have one male property manager who handles the 6 male houses, and you have one female property manager who handles the 5 female houses. As I said, each house has its own individual on-site house manager as well. After the property manager, you have the programs director, who both property managers and house managers report to. The programs director then reports to myself, the director of operations, and the executive director. The executive director spends a lot of time on property as well.
Is there orientation information that is given by the property manager, signed off by both the property manager and the resident?
Yes, and that is done during the intake process.
And as part of that orientation information, is there notice of a cause for discharge from the home?
Yes, so that notice includes if they drink, if they do not comply with the program, if they do not attend therapy, if they do not go to their daily AA and NA meetings. Yes, all of those are included.
Does anyone conduct searches of the house?
Randomly, once a week. The house manager and the property manager partake in that.
Are you and Sarah and others involved in that as well?
I personally am not. As I mentioned, I do most of the administrative back-end work. However, I do oversee the property manager who reports to me when she does searches, if there is ever an issue that occurs, so that I can file a report with the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs.
And if they do find something, what happens to that individual?
That individual is given the opportunity to take a ride back to treatment or to wherever they need to go, but they do have to leave that same day.
I have nothing further of this witness at this time.
Okay, Jennifer?
Okay, so let me just get a couple of my documents here. All right, so I'm just going to kind of go through the issues, hopefully in the order that they were presented. In terms of the parking,
I'm sorry, may I say one other thing beforehand, before you do that?
I guess if your attorney wants you to, you go first.
It's in reference to one of the items that you just mentioned. So I mentioned that there were 9 residents total and that there were 2 per room. I haven't reviewed the floor plan. However, I can guarantee you there are 9 residents total, whether it's 2 per room. I'm not 100% sure, but I can certainly tell you that the total number is 9.
Okay, so I'm just going to address the parking issue first. In your initial application, you indicated that 10% of your residents might have cars. Now we're up to 23%, then you said today 25%. I'm concerned about the inconsistencies in your numbers. So do you have any documentation to show now that we're at the correct amount, that it won't change to 50%, that it won't change to 75%? Because right now we're getting shifting numbers that's
Objection
very
as
unreliable.
to that question. First of all, it's testimony, and there's like 6 different things in it as being compound. She wants to break it down into separate issues.
25, 23.
Otherwise,
Great, I'm happy to do that.
Ask
Happy to do
individual
that.
questions, Jen.
In your initial application, it said that 90% of your applicant, or that your clients did not have cars, correct?
I'm not sure about that. All I can tell you is that for sure it's 25%.
Okay, so if you go ahead and look at the application, you can see in there that they stated 90%. And then when the addendum that you signed.
Wait, Jennifer?
Sure.
Do you see that? Can you point that out?
Yeah, it's, let me just get my copy of the application. I highlighted it.
It's 23, not 10. I mean, not 25. Yeah, I say 25 when it's 23, it's kind of a round up. You get the point, it's around 25, yeah.
It is in number 1 on their application, paragraph number 1, towards the bottom. 90% of our residents do not drive or own a vehicle in early recovery.
Okay.
Okay, that is incorrect.
All right, so you are stating on the record that your application contains incorrect information.
If it says there is only 10% of our residents that have cars, as our program as a whole, that is incorrect. Does it specify as to which neighborhood, which house, anything like that?
It just said 90% of your residents.
Okay, maybe it was referring to our Delco residents.
So, in any case, that's unclear in your application, and, okay. So then, in your addendum that was signed and recently given to this board, here we have, you state, this equates to 23% of all residents throughout the 9 active homes operating in 2023, correct?
Yes.
And for the record, that's Exhibit 3?
What?
Just for the record, you're talking about Exhibit 3?
Exhibit 3, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I have for the record.
Okay, and then today, on the record, you testified to 25%.
I said a little under 25, yes.
All right.
My note says that he said 33%.
33.
Yeah.
So I said that in our...
9 people, 33%, 3 cars.
Right, and that's in reference to what we would allow for at the 10B home, not in reference to what our 9 houses consist of.
No, well, only the 10B homes are subject of this.
She's referring to all 9 of our homes.
Correct, I was just referring to the inconsistencies in the record.
Okay.
All right, so I then want to go to the enforcement of this provision. So we now have granted, given if this is granted, we have this addendum, we have your word that this is going to be what happens. How do you anticipate this being enforced? If the rules aren't followed, who is responsible for the enforcement and who is covering the cost of the enforcement?
So during the intake process, one of the questions we ask the incoming resident is whether they own a car or not. That would be done by the programs director. So she would be responsible for ensuring that we do not increase that number.
Outside of your program, as you know, you are testifying that yes, we're going to do this, but you're also asking for special privileges as a result of that ask. So if for some reason that rule is violated, who will be enforcing it at the township level, and who is covering the cost of township enforcement?
So
Objection.
I can answer that.
No. She's asking him who at the township level would be enforcing this. I object to.
It's a reasonable
I object,
ask if they're gonna
excuse
defend-
me,
Let Bob be heard.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I object to that question and asked him to make an opinion outside of the scope of, the township would have to answer that.
Well,
I mean,
who, you want to ask him who in their organization will be responsible?
sure, who in your organization is responsible?
The programs director, who answers to the executive director and the director of operations, so ultimately it would be on the executive director.
Okay, and what happens when there is a non-compliance? Would that be an removable offense for the resident?
If the resident gets a car, no, that would be an issue for us. We wouldn't allow it to happen in the first place, so it would be a consequence for the employees.
Okay, so there's no plan in place right now if a resident violated that rule to have consequences for
Oh,
them action?
absolutely. If one of the residents got a car without communicating that to us, yes, we would ask them to go to a different property where we don't have a parking limitation, or we would ask them to leave the property, yes.
All right, now let's get into, let's just see. So we're here today talking about definition of a family. And we're talking about a reasonable accommodation to the requirement that only 3 non-related people can live in a property. You gave extensive testimony about policies and procedures of your house. Are those policies, in your opinion, all right, are those policies and procedures that you find common in residential homes?
Absolutely.
So in your own home, like when you were growing up with
Yep.
your family, your mother randomly drug tested
Yes.
you?
I have 10 brothers and sisters, and 3 of them are in recovery, so absolutely, we all got randomly drug tested.
Okay, how about after you were an adult?
Objection. It's not relevant.
I can't believe that you just asked
Whatever
me that.
happened in
Yeah.
his home anyway. This is reasonable accommodation.
Hold on. One at a time. Arlene can't keep a clear record if we don't go one at a time. So your objection is?
It did not relevant.
If I get drug tested as a
No,
child?
no. Adam,
Please.
don't make it worse. And
Only
don't
one of us
get,
can talk at a time.
Certainly.
Thank you. It's not relevant to what we're here for tonight. What happened in his home is not relevant to the discussion.
I agree.
Okay.
Move on, Joe,
Great.
please.
But there is a management structure that oversees the clients in the home, correct?
Yes. The residents.
The clients. So we have, we don't have people self-governing adults. We have people that are enforcing rules on these adults that are outside of the home.
It is very independent living. As much as there is a structure, we expect people to take their own initiative to recreate their lives.
So if there is no limitations on these folks and it's independent living, what is the necessity to have so many people living together?
Objection is to no limitations on these individuals. That's not what was testified to here today.
I think the question was based on the number of individuals.
She said if there was no limitations on these individuals, then. That was the preface of her question.
What? Re-ask the question, Jennifer.
Okay, so you asserted that they're living independently,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time,
Wait,
you have a house
you
manager.
need to give a verbal, Adam. So-
Yes, I said that it is very independent living.
Okay, but we have someone managing the house, and we have a corporate structure, or not corporate structure, but a management structure overseeing that, but yet there is rules and regulations for how they behave in the house, intake forms, requirements to stay in the house.
Right. So the intake forms is to get into the house, and there, of course, there are requirements to stay in the house. In my personal opinion, which is what you're asking, I do not think those conflict with independent living.
Another question, you testified that typical residency is 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do all of the residents start at a 6-month at the same time and graduate together?
No.
So there is fluctuation in who is occupying the house at any given time. It's not one unit moving through the program together.
All the residents don't come from rehab at the same time, no.
Okay. So there is no intention to keep that unit together through the program or for an extended period of time for years?
Objections. What's the relevance of that?
I'm gonna
It's
let her
absolutely
proceed. Go
relevant.
ahead.
There's case law that
Overrule,
requires a family.
go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I know.
So, all right, so you have multiple people who are going to be coming into the house at different points in time and other people moving in and out at different points in time.
People move in and they leave at different times, yes.
Okay, great. I want to talk about something that's in your beginning of residency document, which I'm not sure exactly what exhibit number. This is exhibit number 4.
A4.
I would like for you to read the first sentence under E here, under criteria for termination of residency.
In the case of relapse, we not only understand it, we anticipate it.
Great. Are you aware that the fair housing laws and ADA do not protect against active drug use?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And in your own documents, you are saying we anticipate people using drugs.
We anticipate relapse, absolutely. 65% of our residents graduate sober, 35% of them relapse.
And so if people are actively using drugs, they are not entitled to a reasonable accommodation.
Of course, they were entitled to the reasonable accommodation. As they were using drugs, they got into recovery, and then they came to our program.
In this, you say we anticipate the drug use, correct?
We anticipate that some of our residents will relapse. To assume that 100% of the people that come through our doors are never going to use drugs again would be ridiculous.
So, again, I'm just going to state, if they are using drugs, they are not protected. And if you're anticipating they're going to use drugs, they're still active drug users.
Is that a question?
That's a question. Would you agree with that?
No.
Why would you not agree with it?
Because they're sober, they're not actively using drugs.
but they're relapsing and you anticipate the relapse.
Of course, as I said earlier, 100% of our residents are not never going to use drugs again. That is correct.
Great. I think that's an important fact to get on the record.
Objection to that statement.
It's unnecessary and irrelevant for the board, so
Okay.
I'm not going to strike it.
So, you stated that there will be 9 clients and 1 house.
No, 8 clients, 1 house manager, and that's at full capacity.
Okay. What is the reason? So we're here for a variance from the housing code requirement of only 3 unrelated people. What is the major life activity which that accommodation is accounting for? Because you have to have an accommodation for a disability. A disability is a major, a problem with a major life activity, and the accommodation has to be connected to that disability and that impairment.
Objection as to a compound question. Even I would.
I don't understand the question.
Can you break it down into
Sure.
lay some foundation? And
All right, so your application is asking for a reasonable accommodation, correct?
Yes.
And the assertion is that the people coming into this property are protected under the Fair Housing Act and the ADA as disabled.
Yes.
What is the major life activity that's being impacted that qualifies them as disabled?
Life activity, you mean what is their disability?
So a disability, in order to have a bona fide disability, it has to have some sort of mental or physical impairment that affects a major life activity.
Objection as to, again, she's asking him to make a legal conclusion, and the question is compound, so.
I think it's really important that they understand what they're asking for and why they're asking for it. Do we have someone else here to testify on it? Because then we can ask them.
Objection as to the question.
Yeah, go ahead. You can ask it.
Okay. So what is the major life activity that the mental or physical disability is affecting, and how? What is that?
The disability that our residents have is addiction, for the most part.
What is the major life activity that is affected by the addiction?
Major life activity affected by their decision, all of their life activities are affected by their addiction? I'm still not fully comprehending the question.
Walking, eating, ability to work.
Okay,
ability
I got
to-
that. So, oh, sorry, I thought,
Yeah,
I figured it
those-
out.
those sort
I
of
figured out
things,
what
yes.
you meant. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. For example, some folks that consistently use substances in Philadelphia and in the surrounding area in today's drug market, unfortunately, have been consuming xylazine for a long time, which is a flesh-eating animal tranquilizer. That drug actually eats the limbs of the person who's using that substance. So very often that individual does end up losing their ability to walk, for example. So you're asking me what physical issues are they going to encounter? Physical is what I just said, sometimes it could even be walking. Mental, it's trauma, it's PTSD, it goes on and on.
And so, in that regard, the accommodation you're asking for has to be connected to that particular impacted major life activity. And so I would ask you how this number of residents accommodates for that disability.
Objection again. In every one of her questions, she's trying to put a legal basis to it and ask for an answer. So I object to the question.
to the form or the substance?
Both. I object to the form of the question.
He
Because she said-
he can't make a legal conclusion.
Right, and she's saying in
But I
any
think
accommodation,
the question she can ask, though, is based on why the number, the 9 have in there, is necessary for this particular house.
and that's a proper question, but not the way she's wording
That's
the
what I'm
question.
asking. I'm asking, how does having 9 clients in this property accommodate a qualified disability?
So,
If I may, really quick. I do believe that we have a more qualified witness, Sarah Laurel, the actual founder, who makes these decisions. I believe she's more qualified to be asked this question, and I don't think that he should be answering it. He's the operations director.
Look, if he doesn't know the answer, he
I'll
can
give a
certainly-
quick
he can
answer.
certainly answer. He doesn't know the
So
answer.
there are a lot of answers to that question. One of them, for example, is that all of our residents have a roommate. It accounts for responsibility, pro-social activity, all of that. So we need to have at least 2 people per room, except for the house manager. That is just one of the many reasons. Other reasons consist of, you had another question?
Is there a reason that there can be 2 people in 1 bedroom and then 1 house manager, then have the 3 if the requirement is to have a roommate?
So the house manager doesn't have a roommate. All of the other residents do have a roommate. Are you
Correct.
suggesting we leave some of the rooms empty?
Correct.
Okay.
To meet the code of the township.
So why would we not leave some of the rooms empty? We provide free therapy to our residents. We provide free food to our residents. We pay the rent and we pay the utilities, and we only charge $150 a week, which is, for example, Synergy Homes in another part of Delaware County charges $1,500 a week, and that is how they pay their bills. That is how they ensure that their residents are able to get the resources they need to recreate their lives and not die in their recovery. So yes, ensuring that we don't leave several of the rooms empty so that we can pay those bills is absolutely critical.
So if you signed the lease, correct, for this property?
Yes.
And you were aware of how much money the rent was on this property when you signed the lease?
Correct.
I also want to just note that on this lease, if we can take a look in the exhibit, this property at the time the lease was signed, on the multiple listing services, and I have that record here. Hold on one second.
So it's exhibit,
Correct.
A1.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to give this. And this would be P2. This is the rental history of the property. All right, so this is the listing, the rental listing on the multiple listing services for this property to be rented. If you look on there, the listed rental price was $3,800 a month.
Objection. She's got to lay a foundation that he's even seen this.
I haven't.
Ask him if you've seen it.
Have you seen this?
No.
Okay, can you take a look at it right now?
Sure.
And what question are we going to ask?
I guess we're gonna find out after he takes a look, Adam takes a look at it.
All right, I'm looking at it.
So at the time of the lease, how did you come up with paying $4,000 a month in rent?
That is the amount that the landlord asked for.
Great. Also in your lease, you paid 6 months up front.
Correct.
Okay, why did you pay 6 months up front?
That is what the landlord asked for.
And is there a reason, I guess I can actually have someone testify to the MLS record if you want me to. I can call them up.
You authenticate your exhibits in the way that you would like.
Okay. I can take personally, I look these records up. I'm also a licensed realtor, and I pull these records from the mobile listing service myself.
May I say something, Mr. Mayor?
All right, so in any case, but we'll come back to that. The lease is signed for $4,000 a
What I
month.
just said.
Correct. Signed it for $4,000 a month.
Yes.
And you were aware at the time you signed the lease, based on the terms of the lease, that only 3 residents were going to be allowed to live here unless you got special accommodation.
Correct. Unless we got approval from the township, yes.
Okay. So at the time you signed the lease and made that financial obligation, you knew that your organization could not fund that income if you followed the rules of the township.
In the short term, yes.
Unless the township granted you a variance.
Exactly, which we had no reason to believe they would do otherwise, considering the precedent.
So if we're talking about here that so essentially are you arguing that there's a financial hardship for the granting of this request? That you could not
No.
Objection. Objection.
If he doesn't know, he can say he doesn't know.
And that's not really relevant to what we're here for and what the variance is. This
Exactly.
variance is
It's not a variance, it's a request for a reasonable accommodation, which is
Correct.
different than variance.
correct. And-
Slightly different
and
standard.
financial, she's trying to bring in financial hardship that has no relevance to it.
Well, I think there is relevance. I think there's case law out there that indicates that there's a certain number of individuals that are in a particular unit in order to be able to allow that unit to be functional.
Correct.
Well, I think it's a relevant question in terms of the financing and why the applicant is requesting the amount of individuals living in a particular location.
And I believe he's already testified and answered
So then
that
the
question.
objection would be
Asked
asked
and
and
answered
answered
as well.
something different. Can you
I do have
rephrase
another
the
point to
question?
make, though.
Sure. Did you explore any options before signing this lease for properties that would have been a lower cost and/or would have not needed a reasonable accommodation?
Yes, we knocked on lots of doors. We asked lots of landlords, and this was the home that we thought would be best for our residents for a variety of reasons, which I'd be happy to get into. And in regards to what I said previously, as much as we want to be able to pay the rent, if we cannot, based on that, it is not necessary because we have previously been able to bring in donations from individuals who want to support the work that we do.
So if this request was not granted, would you be able to maintain the 3 residents in the property?
Yeah, objection, sorry. I believe that's beyond the scope of his job. He's not the financial director. He's not the founder. This is not within the scope.
I would suggest that my boss answers that question. Yes.
He had previously testified about it, so.
You did.
Previously
If you don't
testified
know,
about
Adam,
what?
Then say you don't know.
Okay.
And if you do know the answer, just answer a question.
What's the question again, please?
So under our code, you can maintain 3 residents in there. If the accommodation was not granted, would those 3 residents remain for the remainder of the lease, or would it not be financially viable?
First of all, I'm going to object. Under your code, it says 3 unrelated residents unless a reasonable accommodation is requested, which is requested here. So it's irrelevant whether 3 unrelated people can live in that home and whether or not it's financially feasible. These are disabled individuals under the Act. We're asking for a reasonable accommodation, and none of this is relevant as to whether or not you should grant that reasonable accommodation. In fact, it's up to us to prove that there should be a reasonable accommodation, and then it goes back. So, again, I don't know what we're getting at in here, especially asking the operations manager that question, but number 2, it's really not relevant for what's going on here.
So I think if the question is more aptly posed to another witness, then the witness should respond in kind that he either knows or doesn't know the answer to the question.
It's still not relevant as well.
Can I argue why it's relevant?
Yes.
Okay, so there is a reasonableness component to any request for a reasonable accommodation. And I think the argument that I am trying to make is that there's no reason to have more than the allowed number of residents. It's not reasonable to have that. And so by showing that there's absolutely no reason to have that, it proves that it's not a reasonable request.
So in that instance, then it wouldn't be reasonable to have 4 people. You're limiting it just solely to the 3 in the code.
Well, I would like to question someone on at what point where is this line? Because some of
And I think that's the issue. I think the issue is how many people need to be in this facility to make it viable.
Correct. But also on the alternative that they purposely entered a situation where complying with the code was not viable.
Entered into a lease that indicates that
Look,
they
I
apply
think
for a variance.
the lease speaks for itself. I think the testimony is from the applicant's witness at this point that 9 is what they need. I think if there's additional witnesses that they're going to have that would further provide additional insight on that, I think they should do that. At which point, then I think the question may be right for that individual as well.
I understand. Yes, I just wanted to get some reply to some of his testimony because I thought it was relevant to this.
Well, if he put it on the ground. So what was the question that you were asking there, Jen? What was your question?
If the reasonable accommodation was not granted, would 3 residents remain in the home?
The answer was yes, absolutely. And in answer to your other question, I just wanted to add one thing. As much as it benefits our residents because of pro-social behavior, accountability, having a roommate, et cetera, it also benefits the thousands of Americans that don't have anywhere to go after rehab. One of the leading causes of relapse is that folks after going to rehab don't have anywhere to go, whether it's financial insecurities, whether it's just no beds available. There is a severe shortage of recovery homes in America.
Relevant to that actual property, he's testifying about things beyond the scope of our.
6 beds.
Well, we're gonna,
I'm trying to answer the question. Yeah.
I'm gonna make a ruling, if that's okay with you, we're gonna let him answer the question, and the board will give, due weight to the relevancy or irrelevancy of answers and questions, by the way.
Yeah. So again, there's a severe shortage of recovery house beds in Pennsylvania. The Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs only recognized recovery homes as legitimate entities in December of 2021. And so up until then, you could not register with Pennsylvania as a recovery home. And once they did create that registration, it has led to just a few hundred recovery homes actually being authorized in Pennsylvania. There were 65,000 people that went to rehab in 2022. Certainly not, 450 times 6 is not going to be 65,000, I'll tell you that.
So in your testimony, you also said that these recovery homes would comply with Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Program standards, correct?
Yes.
Does your organization run a recovery house at 1531 South Myrtle Ward Street in Philadelphia?
Yes.
All right. And are you the owner of that property?
No.
Who is the owner of that property?
Melanie Cataldi. I believe her name is Cataldi? No, that's the wrong last name. McConnell. Melanie McConnell.
All right. So I just want to point out that I'd like you to take a look. This is the previous rental license for this property.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you were listed at the business mailing address. So you were responsible as the agent for this property.
Objection, may I see the document before?
Take a look at the
Thank
document.
you.
I would like this to be P3.
And what is it, Jennifer?
This is violations for one of their, code violations for one of their recovery houses in South Philly.
First of all, I object to that. It's not relevant to this. But does she have a lease saying that they're responsible for the maintenance of the property? That's absolutely ridiculous.
I don't even know what the citations were.
I don't either,
So,
but
we're gonna
she's talking
find
about
out.
code violations.
We're
And I
gonna
would
find
also
out.
like to put this in as the next exhibit. I believe it's
You just did 3.
E4.
Did she give you 3?
Yeah.
And this is the licensing for that property, as well as the numerous violations from that licensing agency that facility received. Let me just take my documents here. Hold on one second.
She resolved him, the landlord. Just so you all know. Just so you know.
Jennifer, take your time. Nobody's rushing you. And Adam, take your time with your answers. Nobody's rushing you.
Absolutely,
All right,
thank you.
So let's take a look first at the license on D4, I believe, which is this page, this other one right here. Hold on, this other exhibit.
Okay.
Which exhibit are you referring to?
D4?
P4.
E4?
E4,
Okay.
sorry.
Here we go.
Which is the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs. And this indicates that this is a licensed facility through Savage Sisters, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and if you flip to the next page, you have a survey conducted on 11/9/2023 by that agency, which indicates 13
Objection, number one. The prejudice severely outweighs the probative value, and it has nothing to do with this property, what another property had.
It's absolutely relevant because they are talking about bringing a program into our community, telling us it's going to be safe, fine, they're following all these regulations, and it's absolutely probative to have evidence of another facility that is not following the rules and not doing what they're saying they're going to do in this facility. one of the things that they need to show is that this isn't going to alter our community. And if you're not following rules and regulations, we're going to have problems that come from that lack of.
Objection is to that, too.
I do see somewhat of an issue in terms of prior bad habits or prior bad acts in connection with the current application. My initial question is as to the documents itself. These are formal public records?
Correct. If you go to the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, you can look up this information. If you type in Savage Sisters, it will pull up these records. It's available as a public record. We can provide that website right now for you guys to go ahead and look up. It's a state website.
Sorry, what page are you referring to again?
We are looking at
Page.
this exhibit. This is the
Right,
license.
yeah, I'm there.
And the next pages are the 13 violations. Which basically shows that they're not following any of the procedures.
Objection is to that
So-
comment, too. And do we have a ruling on whether or not you're going to allow this in?
Yeah, and here's look, there's no custodian or record here, but it appears to be a public document. It's obviously hearsay, but again, rules of evidence here are relaxed, so the board can accept it and give it its due weight. The one issue that I think is at hand is that in terms of cross-examination, I do see in Exhibit A3 that there is reference to since opening the first house in 2019, Savage Sisters Housing Program has never received a complaint relating to parking or any other matter. I think the door is open based on the Exhibit A3 to ask questions about any prior complaints or any violations in connection with Savage Sisters. So the board's going to allow the information. Exhibit P4 and P3.
And I'm going to bring up witnesses at a later point to testify to further evidence about Savage Sisters saying they comply with these regulations, but we're going to move past that. I just want to get on the record that this is a licensed facility run by Savage Sisters not complying with regulations for this document. I also want to go back to P3. This is, again, public records. This is from...
We're going to swear her in if she's going to keep testifying. I object to it.
Yeah.
It's unprofessional.
At this point, I don't mind identifying records, but in order to get them in, you're going to have somebody at least testify to them and identify what they are.
Sure, I'm happy to do that right now if you want me to.
Well, I think the best thing we do is why don't we get through the applicant's case in chief, and then your case in chief certainly being able to present that.
Great, but I also want to question him based
Certainly,
on his
certainly.
documents. Okay, so I wanted you to take a look at P3, which I gave a copy to your attorney as well.
Yep.
Can you identify what the property address is here?
1531 South Myrtlewood Street.
Okay, and if you look here, this record, what is this record showing here as you're looking at the paper?
The date it was added, the date it was updated, the resolution date.
Okay, so if you could read up here, what does this say here at the top?
An official website of the City of Philadelphia.
Okay, so I want to submit this as a public government record related to problems and code violations with the property. It is publicly available information, find on atlas.phila.gov.
Again, it's the same objection. It's noted for the record that it is hearsay. However, again, relaxed rules. We'll accept it, and the board will give it the weight it deems appropriate.
Great. And I would just like to show you, and so can you read what the type is here?
Rental license, 1 and 2 family.
Okay, and then this is another violation.
New use occupied prior to co.
Okay, and then this last one.
Clearance from ignition sources.
Okay, I think that that's relevant. I also think it's relevant to note.
Objection again, as to what she thinks. It's really not relevant.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just.
And if she wants to be sworn in and testify.
Sustain. Got it.
I got it. I'm going to try to put myself here. Again, at the top, what does this say?
An official website of the City of Philadelphia.
Okay, and can you read
these two lines here,
Which two lines?
this one and this one.
Permits, license, violations, and appeals by address, and then which line?
It says rental.
3202 rental.
Okay, so, in here, there is showing, an issue date and an inactive date, correct?
Correct.
And what is the inactive date?
April 20th, 2020.
And we can agree that that is a date that is almost 4 years ago, correct?
Correct.
This site is still being rented by Savage Sisters, correct?
Correct.
And then can you read who is the contact person for this rental license?
Al-Assad Adam.
And is that you?
Yes.
Is that your address?
No, it's my previous address.
Okay. That's all. That's all on that. Hold on one second. Let me just think here.
What was the point of that?
Council, you're going to have another member of Savage Sisters come up and testify as well?
Yes.
All right, I think then that's all for you then.
Okay.
I did redirect.
Township have
No
any
questions?
And we also have redirect as well.
Yeah, we'll give you a chance.
Share the mic with you.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to back up a little bit because, again, I don't know anything about. I want to talk about the general operations of Savage Sisters. I'm not familiar with them. The board's not familiar with the organization. It is a nonprofit organization,
Yes.
and it's been in operation since 2019, I think I saw.
Yes, we got our 501c3 in 2020.
I believe you testified there are 11 houses currently,
Yes.
and you said 6 are male and 5 are female?
Yes.
You never mix men and women together in a house?
No.
Are all of these houses having that roommate system with the house manager?
Yes.
Generally, how many people are in those houses?
7. In Philadelphia, all of the homes that we have are 3 bedrooms, so it's 2 per room plus.
So those all have 7?
It's 6 to 7, depending on the size of the room. Yes.
And that those, for your purposes of the operation, are successful with the program?
Yes, it's resulted in one of the highest graduation rates in the state.
And you said a typical program is around 6 months on average, although there's not a firm.
Yes, of course, if somebody relapses, then they leave immediately, so they don't make it the whole 6 months. 6 months is the minimum to graduate.
And it's not just drug treatment, but also alcohol treatment as well, or counseling.
Yes. Well, not treatment by any means,
Recovery.
but yes.
Is there any co-occurring treatment, and by that I mean, again, counseling or recovery, where you may have those that are suffering with both mental illness and drug or alcohol issues?
Most of our residents are suffering from both mental illness and drug and alcohol issues, and so they do all have to get into therapy. Yes.
So generally, the services that are offered as part of the program, therapy services,
Yes.
are those held on-site or are those all held off-site? By that I mean outside of the house.
Some of them are held virtually, which would be in a private room with the resident, and then the rest are held in person at different facilities. Kickboxing studio, for example, outside of the house.
Are there any other, besides your activities, job searching, physical activities, are there any other services that are offered to your residents to help them with their program?
Yes, we have people come in to help with workforce development. We have organizations like Broad Street Ministries come in to help them get set up with benefits, as well as transportation support. So yes, there are a plethora of other resources and services provided to the residents.
I believe you testified that the sobriety is monitored through random weekly drug testing.
Yes, and alcohol breathalyzers.
And you did say they pay $150 in rent?
They are supposed to pay $150 in rent. However, we do cover many of our residents' rents for their first several weeks at the least. And by we, I mean Savage Sisters and our supporters, not just Savage Sisters.
And you stated that Savage Sisters also covers the price of food for the residents?
They do pay $25. However, we provide a full kitchen, which $25 a week with only half of the residents paying does not cover food as a whole, no. But they do contribute I'm sorry, not $25, $20 a week.
How are meals prepared for the residents?
House managers and residents prepare meals together.
Do they eat together?
Very often, yes. If not all 6 or 7 of the residents, at least 2, 3, 4, sometimes all 6 and 7.
Besides, you mentioned sort of activities like kickboxing and physical activities. Are those usually done in groups, or do people seek out their own interests?
So we have group therapies very often. It's a regular occurrence. And we do, of course, the cognitive behavioral therapy is individual.
Any other activities you do together, socialize?
Yeah, so we do softball regularly in the spring and the summer. We do ecotherapy at John Hines National Park, which is essentially all of the residents getting together with a therapist and traveling through nature. Yes, there are a number of group therapies and group activities held together, yes.
And you testified that the participant needs to have a job to be in this program, correct? By that I mean, I believe the testimony was you have 2 weeks to search for a job. During those 2 weeks, you're sort of on lockdown.
Right. And
Except for therapy and for counseling.
AA, NA, counseling, yeah.
And if you can't find a job, you sort of remain in that lockdown period?
Blackout period, yes.
And that would remain throughout?
Until you get a job, yes, absolutely. Unless, of course, you have a reason that you cannot get a job, in which case you do not have to get a job. There are people who are on disability.
Are the jobs, 9-to-5 jobs? Can they be overnight jobs? With the curfews? How does it work with the curfew and finding a job?
For folks who do get overnight jobs, which is strongly discouraged, however, in certain situations, it has been beneficial to the residents. We do have a house manager get a written plan and follow that. I can tell you of 2 residents in the entire time I've been working here that have had overnight jobs. It's an incredibly rare occurrence.
How many residents throughout all 11 houses would you say that you have?
65. Maybe at this point, no, more like 62.
I don't think I know the answer to this. Is this house intended to be a male house or a female house?
Male house.
And they would have the curfew requirements that are on these other houses?
Absolutely.
So all of the operations generally for the other houses would also be applicable to this proposed house?
Yes.
And you said that visitation, you're not allowed to have random visitors?
No, you are not.
No friends?
Certainly not.
The family involved?
Yes, with with communication. Yes, with the house manager, which typically then goes to the property manager as well.
And that includes generally siblings, parents, spouses, children?
Parents for the most part.
Do you find that there are children? A lot of your participants have children?
A lot of our participants have children, but the children do not come to the house, no.
What about spouses?
No.
And no one's allowed to spend the night in the house unless if you're living in the house?
Exactly.
So I imagine there's no parties at the house then, correct?
Certainly not. No alcohol and in bed by 11, so no parties.
But that, I mean, people that live in the house can get together, play some board games, drink some sodas, but you're not going to have a bunch of guests coming over to have a raucous party, particularly after curfew.
That is absolutely correct, especially because most of our, all of our residents are required to be out of bed by 9 unless they have an overnight job, so.
They have to be out of bed by 9.
Out of bed by 9, yes.
Is there any sort of signing in, signing out procedure so you know where they are?
There's a sign-in sheet every time you walk in or out the door with where you're going, what time you left, yes.
And you said that they don't receive mail there, and there wouldn't be any opportunity to receive a package at that?
They do receive mail, however, the house manager does collect the mail and then distribute it to the residents.
Are there any cameras for security on the outside of the facility?
Yes.
Would this house have
Yes.
cameras outside for security?
It does.
Okay.
Sorry.
The role of the house manager, are they trained in any sort of drug and alcohol counseling or recovery in any way, or are they simply just participants that have stayed on and have been successful?
executive director can attest to the specific types of training, but yes, they go through vigorous in-house training, yes.
Are you paid to be a manager of the
No,
house? You're not an employee of Savage Sisters when you're living
no, the house managers are not paid.
there? Exhibit A4 discusses the code of conduct. And I'm not going to have you read it, I'm not sure if you have it, but just generally, what is the code of conduct?
It is a long code of conduct, but essentially it says that you will abide by all of the rules and you will remain sober.
And there was a resident's rights. Generally, what are the resident's rights as of relation to Savage Sisters?
They have the right to make a complaint to DDAPS and to Savage Sisters staff. They have a right to have all of their information held privately. They have a right to having communication with DDAPS outside of Savage Sisters. Although I don't have the document in front of me, so I couldn't tell you all of the
More
rights.
technical rights related to the program itself.
Yes,
They don't have the right to privacy, for example. They have a right to be searched by Savage Sisters.
exactly, yes.
Now, I think what I'm hearing is that there'd be a condition that there be no more than 3 vehicles, assuming it can accommodate 3 vehicles, not have on-street parking. And I believe I saw the exhibit stated that if you needed more, you'd obtain a lot, a rental lot somewhere else.
If we needed more than 3 parking spots, we would definitely go pay for it and get it elsewhere, yes.
Do you know if there's an available lot for that to be accommodated?
I have looked into it, and it is a few blocks away, but yes, there are.
Where?
Westchester Pike, down the street. I Google mapped it, and I typed in lots near me and put that address in.
So, but do you have a specific location, Adam?
I don't have it on me right now, no. I can bring that,
Can you bring
certainly.
it to the next hearing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Would that be publicly, like public lots or lots that you would rent long-term
Public lots that we pay to park in.
on a daily basis?
Yes, which, again, that was in mind with the idea that we find it incredibly unlikely that we will ever encounter that situation, because if a 4th resident needs a car, we will transition them to another home.
Go ahead, John.
You heard reference to community concerns about sex offenders being on the property.
I don't think we've heard that in his testimony. I think he said that they're not permitted. They do a check, and if someone's on the sex offender list, they're not permitted in the home.
So no one would be allowed to be in the program that would be on the sex offender registry, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, as
You'd be
far as I'm
able to
aware.
set a condition of any relief, if any, that there be no registered sex offenders. I understand that there might be some criminal backgrounds, but no one that's related to any sex offender registry requirements.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to put that into writing.
Is anybody living on the property right now?
Yes,
And those are 3 residents that are participating in the program?
and the house manager,
So two residents and a house manager?
who is technically a resident as he is not an employee.
And those are participants that are in the recovery program along with the house manager.
Yes,
Has it been working for them so far?
absolutely.
And we were asked, if those 3 would remain in the home if no relief was granted. I believe you testified that they would.
Yes.
So I guess the ultimate question here is, why are more than 3 needed if that's what you have now?
Due to pro-social behaviors, as I mentioned earlier, having
I'm going to interrupt you. I don't want you to rush through this, because I think it's an important point. I want you to take your time to explain to this board why you need more than 3 in order to support your reasonable accommodation.
Absolutely. So the most important thing, the whole reason that we operate in the first place, is to provide a safe, structured, and pro-social environment to people in recovery in Pennsylvania. Limiting our house to 3 residents would entirely defeat that purpose. It would take a bed from 6 different individuals that would potentially save their lives and impact the lives of all of their loved ones for their lifespan. So by far, that is the most important point.
Why do the 3 that are there now need the additional 6?
The 3 that are there now do not need the additional 6. The 6 people in rehab that need a bed are the ones who need the additional 6. It is the folks that need recovery that would be denied that opportunity if this house was limited to 3 individuals.
So is it fair to say that your request for 9 is based upon the max availability of the rooms on the property and not because that's what's needed in order to make the recovery program work?
Not necessarily. I just think that that is by far the most important thing. I think that a house with only 3 residents would significantly deter or take away from the impact that having several residents actually, several roommates actually, or
What is that?
the impact that that has. Yes. It is a pro-social impact. It is an impact of accountability. It is an impact of networking. It is an impact.
Those are great buzzwords.
Right.
Explain to me what that means. I mean, what does accountability look like to you?
Right.
What does the sociability look like to you in relation to how it helps their recovery?
So one of the requirements I mentioned earlier that the residents have to take on as soon as they get there is getting a home group, for example, getting a commitment at that home group and getting a sponsor. So many of our residents sponsor other residents, for example. So everybody here is not familiar with AA and NA practices, but in AA and NA, when you are in recovery, you do have to get a sponsor who walks you through the 12 steps. So many of our residents depend on senior residents to walk them through those 12 steps, to introduce them to a home group, to help them get a commitment, to participate in kickboxing with them, and to participate in softball with them, and to hold them accountable and make sure that when they're struggling and on the verge of a relapse, that they have somebody who they relate to, that they care about, that they can talk to, that cares about them. We've never had a house with 3 people in it on a long-term scale, and I don't think it would be nearly as impactful for the folks in the house if it was limited to those 3 people based on all of
Mr.
those
Walker.
things.
I'm sorry. May I ask a question? Well, can you define what a home group is? I'm not familiar with that.
So,
what that is.
Every person in AA and NA gets a home group, which is a specific facility that has AA and NA meetings on a regular basis. So they choose that home group and they go to that group once a day. That is their home group. That is who they attend AA and NA meetings with on a long-term basis, as well as get a commitment. So, for example, a commitment would be showing up to the meeting 10 minutes early and setting up all the chairs, preparing the coffee and distributing it during the meetings. Those all happen at a home group. Again, of our 12-person staff.
Adam, is it fair, so they're NA and AA meetings, right?
Yes.
And they're not within the house, they're
No.
in some other location.
Exactly.
And, I mean, everyone has a sponsor
Mm-hmm.
in either program, NA or AA.
Right.
But the sponsors don't necessarily live with.
Certainly not, no.
Can I answer your question, Jesse?
So the home group is not somewhere they go after they graduate the program. It's something that they go to while they're in the program.
From the very beginning, exactly. And I will say, the executive director here can answer that question a lot better than I can.
And even after they graduate from the program,
Then they stay in that home group, yes. And they sponsor new individuals as they come in, et cetera.
And I think I'm going to defer some other questions in that area to your boss, and probably has more of the
Recovery mindset,
view,
yeah.
how it impacts the recovery. There was some testimony about the use of illegal drugs and all that would disqualify you under the FHA from the definition of being a disabled individual. Residents are not permitted to use drugs on the premises. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the drug testing is randomly and weekly in order to determine that?
Yes.
And in Exhibit A4, you do anticipate that, but it wasn't really clear to me what the operation is when you find someone that has relapsed or is in the middle of relapsing, is not sober or is high, they're on site. Certainly, you're not allowing that from what I'm hearing, so how do you react?
Well, the first thing we do is contact their emergency contact. All residents have to give us their emergency contact upon move-in. Second, we offer them the opportunity to take transportation to rehab, and we tell them we will help get them a bed in rehab, which is not a simple process.
So would there be any type of a situation where someone is relapsing and you would say, just go upstairs and sleep it off?
Never would we let them out of our eyesight, no.
I mean, in the house.
In the house, we would never let them out of our sight. Once we have determined that they have relapsed, they will be under supervision until they are discharged from the property.
So they would have to leave the house if there was a relapse?
Yes,
And would you be willing to make that a condition of any approval?
it is a condition in our resident agreement.
And for a condition of the zoning approval, if anything was given?
Absolutely.
That you would not be allowed to allow someone to remain on the site in any sort of incapacitated state?
Yes,
And you would, but it wouldn't automatically be it sounds like you wouldn't actually just kick them out of the program, cut them off.
no, we would hold their bed in hopes that, well, if they were agreeing to go to rehab and we helped transport them to rehab, then we would hold their bed, yes.
Have you ever had a situation where you had to kick somebody out of the program and they just didn't want to go?
Absolutely.
What do you do in that situation?
We call their emergency contact and we ask them, the individual, not their emergency contact, where they would like to be taken. And then we drive them there and we drop them off.
And they're not, the individuals aren't on the lease, just your operations on the lease, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever had to call the police, try to force somebody out of a home because they wouldn't leave?
We've never had to call the police to force anyone out of our home. No, we have had to call the police before for outside circumstances, but not to force anyone out of our home, no.
Now, you've talked about the parking. We've heard a little bit about your operations. Are there any other steps that Savage Sisters intends to take or you believe does take in order to limit the impact of this reasonable accommodation on the neighboring properties? And that being, normally you're supposed to have 3 unrelated, you're asking for 9.
Right.
It's more people in essentially a rental property, albeit purporting to operate as a functional family unit. Still more people than normally would be there. So I understand the parking and limiting the parking. Is there anything else that you think limits the impact of having that many people on the surrounding area?
We don't allow people to hang out on the front porch. We don't allow people to smoke cigarettes on the front porch. That is one complaint that we had in a Philadelphia home several years ago, and so we implemented that rule throughout all of our programs. Essentially, when we hear a complaint from the community, we take that specific complaint and we try to address it as specifically as we can.
So people aren't allowed to hang out on the front porch at all?
At all, correct.
I'm assuming you don't let smoking inside, correct?
Correct.
Where would people smoke then?
The back porch.
So they can smoke in the back porch, but not the front porch?
Correct, because the back porch is in the backyard and it is not visible to the public, and we don't want a bunch of people hanging out on the porch smoking cigarettes, as we want to reduce the impact of having 9 people in our house on the community.
And if you were granted any relief, would you agree to a condition that there is to be no smoking on the front porch or in front of the house?
Absolutely.
And you've testified that you're asking for no more than 9 people staying there at any time, correct?
Max capacity, 9.
And that would be even if there was an addition put on the house, or if there was a remodel of the garage to make it into an additional apartment, you wouldn't use that and you would not be able to have any more people.
We would never use the garage, and we would never have more than 9 people no matter what happens.
And you would agree you wouldn't add any additional beds, whether it's in a room or a garage?
Yes.
And you would agree that all the bedrooms, the main rooms, the attic, the basement would have functional CO2 and smoke alarms?
Yes.
You'd agree that all the rooms would meet all occupancy requirements of Haverford Township related to fire code standards and property maintenance code standards?
Yes.
And you'd agree, as a condition of relief, that the township would be permitted to perform a life safety inspection prior to any additional occupancy above those 3 people?
Yes.
And then thereafter, on essentially a 2-year cycle, perform a life safety inspection, assuming we'll be giving proper notice to the house?
Yes.
And would you agree that any relief, if any, that was granted to your organization would have to be to your organization in its nonprofit status?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
If there's a concern that eventually you move from a nonprofit status to a for-profit organization, because there are for-profit recovery centers.
Unfortunately.
Would you agree that any relief, if any, was given to you, it would have to be you remained as a nonprofit?
Yes.
Would you also agree that the relief would be strictly to Savage Sisters and would not be able to be assigned to any other entity, either in another recovery house that may want to operate out of that house after you leave or in your place? If
Yes.
you could leave early from your lease?
Yes, we would agree to that, no problem.
And you'd understand that if there was any violations of these conditions, if you were given relief, that it would be a zoning violation essentially, and the house would receive a notice of violation that would have to be remedied, and if not, you'd sustain daily fines from the township.
Yes.
That's all the questions I have for Mr. Alsop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good break. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to readdress the parking situation. So this is A9, Exhibit A9, and that is page 3, Section 1, as was shown earlier. Can you please, so this was discussed earlier. Could you please read that sentence out loud for me, the entirety, just from where it's marked?
90% of our residents do not drive or own a vehicle in early recovery.
Does that statement mean that at no point will more than 10% of residents drive a vehicle?
No, because we serve folks in early recovery and late stages of recovery.
Okay. So I want to discuss the anticipation of the relapse that was mentioned earlier. After a resident relapses, are they allowed to stay in the home?
No.
No. And will you be requesting accommodations continue being made for residents that are no longer within your home?
No.
All right. As for the activities, you mentioned that there are a number of activities. Can you run through some in-home activities?
Yoga, in the house, Reiki, Goddess Day, and Valiance Day.
And do the residents all participate in that?
Yes.
Okay, no further questions.
Jennifer? Yes.
So you said they're not allowed to, if someone has experienced a relapse and has used drugs in the home, they're not allowed to stay in the home.
Yes.
Are they allowed to be in the home while you make arrangements for them to go to rehab?
Under full supervision, yes.
But they are technically still in the home as an active drug user.
Yes, however, they are given no more than that day. So there is no overnight capacity to deal with a resident that has relapsed.
If someone has relapsed, they come in, they're clearly having an episode where they've clearly imbibed some sort of substance, and they come home at the 11 p.m. curfew. What happens?
We stay up all night and get them a bed in rehab immediately.
And by immediately, are we talking about within hours, within the day? What are we talking about?
Within 12 hours.
And so for those 12 hours, though, they can be active drug users in the home.
Under full supervision, and typically it does not take 12 hours.
Quick clarification, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
While they're under full supervision, are they permitted to use drugs?
No.
That's all.
John, you have anything else?
Questions?
All right, we're going to take a bathroom break, 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene. We're in recess. All right, we'll reconvene the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board. I believe the floor is yours.
Thank you. My understanding is you're going to be stopping at 11, is that correct?
Yes, we have to.
Okay.
The doors to the township building lock
That's fine.
automatically, and we're not an open meeting past 11.
So obviously, this isn't going to be finished tonight, and I would request that we reconvene, because I don't want to start a witness and in the middle of it have to come back and everybody remember what went on. So I would ask.
So you want to break at this point?
I do. I think it'd be beneficial.
You have more witnesses?
I do.
Yeah. Numerous.
Okay, so we have a few witnesses that still need to go. I can understand the desire not to break up a witness's testimony. I did speak with with Jennifer, and I believe she was in agreement as well, that it makes sense for purposes of cross-examination not to actually have to recall what a particular witness said in order to cross-examine. And it's also possible that, we may not actually have a transcript, although, Arlene is phenomenal getting things out, best. But I don't, it's also difficult to kind of prep for that. So I can understand that scenario. So
Thank you.
I believe what the board desire is here, we meet twice a month, but there are other cases that are pending that are coming up. And we believe that this matter deserves single attention of the board rather than, having it listed as multiple, or at least one of several other meetings, not only for them, but obviously for the residents here. We want to make sure we're focused on this alone. So we would be looking to schedule a special meeting for this April 25th, I think is what worked.
Yes, it worked in my
and I
schedule.
believe that works for all the parties. Is that correct?
Are we going to start at the same time, or?
Yes.
Okay.
We can start early. You want to start earlier? 7 o'clock?
Can you be here at 7?
One second, I'm just double checking here.
Okay.
Sure.
We're good.
Okay.
So we can start at 7 o'clock, start it earlier.
7:15?
7:15? Okay,
7:15 is great.
if that works.
At least it gives us another half an hour.
Yes, and I think that's warranted. And how many witnesses do you think you have?
Another 4, maybe 5.
Okay, and you?
I have at least 4 plus other neighbors that probably want to testify.
Okay, all right. For procedural point, obviously, I know there's a lot of residents here. We are still in the midst of the applicant's case in chief. Once they're done, all the other party participants will have their case in chief. Jennifer will present with her case in chief. I don't know, I know Mr. Walko for the township said he didn't think he had any witnesses, but to the extent that they would have their case in chief. And then once all the parties are done, then we would open up to obviously public comment for everybody to participate and provide comment once all of the party participants have finished and rested their case in chief. So procedurally, that's how this matter will move forward. At this juncture, if the board wants to, based on that request, we can grant that request, continue this in agreement to April 25th. There would be no need to re-advertise for that. It's noticed in public, and then I don't think there's any.
Waivers.
No, I guess that's the other thing. Does everybody agree to waive any municipalities planning code?
MPC.
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right. So essentially, the MPC sets forth a specific time frame within which the hearings need to continue. So technically, it's every 45 days, a hearing needs to happen. So just to the extent that we may be over that 45 days, if the applicants waive that, then there's nobody's going to say that we missed the time frame and that there's a deemed approval or anything along those lines. So with everybody agreeing to waive the time frame, it allows us to schedule it for April 25th with no reservations. Sure.
How will it be enforced?
They don't have any relief.
Code
Yeah,
enforcement?
Code enforcement. There's no relief at this point.
If we see more than 3, we'll call code enforcement.
Yeah, not us. That would be something to deal with the township. So, with that, does the board want to motion to adjourn?
Well, John, you're good for April 25th,
Yes.
7:15? Okay. And you, John?
I've got it.
Any administrative matters we need to address? Then we are adjourned, and we'll reconvene this hearing on April 25th.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.